you remember that orange guy with the funny hair, Donald Trump, and he was always talking about Mexico and a border and all that stuff. Well, now Biden, who used to call him racist, is sort of doing a lot of the things, or wants to do a lot of things that Trump was doing. We've got some info here from The Blaze. The Biden administration has reached a deal this week with the Mexican government to relaunch the Trump-era Remain in Mexico program. The program, officially known as Migrant Protection Protocols, was implemented in 2019 under Trump and requires migrants seeking asylum in the U.S. to stay in Mexico while they wait for their U.S. court hearings. By establishing the program, Trump aimed to prevent migrants traveling to the southern border through Mexico from disappearing before their court hearings and thus avoiding potential deportation. I mean, that sounds pretty sane to me, and yet, of course, it was called racist about 2 years ago. Now it's being ushered in by the Biden administration, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys saw this, but like an hour ago, Fauci called it the Wuhan virus. That was something Trump was always called racist for, too. Yeah, he actually called it the Wuhan virus. I just saw it this morning.
Oh, my gosh.
Liz, let me throw to you on this one first. I mean, we should just sort of move past the hypocrisy, right? Like, that's not the surprising part here. Sane policy, is that the surprising part?
Well, listen, don't give the Biden administration more credit than they deserve. They haven't come to their senses. They're not re-implementing this policy because it makes sense. They're doing so because a court is making them. A court is forcing them to. And the court even said that they have to implement this policy, again, in good faith, meaning they can't try to get around it here. But, I mean, this policy is a good policy. It makes sense. And I'll tell you why it makes sense. It makes sense because if we have all of these migrants who are essentially falsely claiming asylum just because they want to be released into the United States, we have to ask, okay, well, how many of them show up for their court dates after they have been, detained by the Border Patrol and then released into the United States and given a court date, told to come back to have their asylum claim adjudicated? How many of them actually come back? Well, there was one particular judge who said that over 90% of the migrants that she gave court dates to did not show up for their hearing. Well, no kidding. That's human nature. I mean, Dave, would you show back up? I probably wouldn't, to be honest. In this situation, I wouldn't, if I'm being honest. They're not. So, of course, then this is just a soft form of amnesty. This is a way of allowing migrants, regardless of whether their asylum claims are legitimate, to just fade into the shadows into the United States. Of course, the Biden administration didn't want to do this. But the thing is, without this policy, what happens is what's happening at the border right now, a travesty. I mean, the Biden administration's policies on immigration are anti-woman, they're anti-child, and they're anti-immigrant. And that's not even taking into account the fact that it's dangerous for our national security and a burden on welfare. 1 in 3 women and children are sexually assaulted on their way to cross the border after they cross the border while still in these cartel trafficking houses. It is anti-immigrant, anti-woman, and anti-child to put a policy in place knowing that it will lead to the bodily harm of these people just so that the cartels and the coyotes can make a buck off of it.
By the way, it's also basically pro-COVID because Fauci was asked this week about, vaccines for people on airplanes coming into the country and masks and all that. And he's like, yeah, that's all good. And then they asked him about, people crossing the southern border illegally. He's like, well, that's something else. I mean, it's just so bananas. Josh, bananas,
it's also
is
not
that the
true,
right
by
word?
the way, what he said. It's not true what Fauci said. Fauci said that there are some people that are getting tested. It is not a widespread policy. You can ask any Border Patrol agent, any ICE agent. This is not a widespread thing. They are not testing on any kind of large scale basis.
No, you could just see the video that they only show you on Fox, actually, with just thousands of people, and they're not social distancing either. Josh, I suppose you're not surprised by any of this?
No, I mean, look, we all remember the videos from Del Rio, Texas, which, of course, was like the big hot topic of the day just like a month and a half, 2 months ago or so here. I mean, the Biden administration they've been disastrous on a lot of issues, obviously. I mean, Afghanistan, the withdrawal there was particularly egregious, I would say. But I'm holding aside, like, perhaps the Afghanistan kind of crap show. Really, immigration and the border in particular has been the one area where I think they have consistently and repeatedly erred most egregiously here. And Liz is totally right to mention that they're only doing this on literally due to a judicial decree and from a very good judge, by the way, Judge Kaczmarek in Amarillo, Texas. I was very briefly colleagues with him before he was tapped for the bench. He's a wonderful conservative, so he did the right thing here, of course. But I've actually talked over the years with a lot of kind of DOJ folks, both while I was serving in the Trump administration and afterwards. They literally unanimously have told me that of all the various policies that the Trump administration put into place, MPP was by far the most effective at actually stemming the tide of legal immigration. It's for the extremely common sense, logical reason that is exactly what Liz said, which is if you get past the border, we have this ridiculous catch and release policy going back to the Obama administration when Jay Johnson was Secretary of Homeland Security. And when you're releasing to the interior, as Liz said, of course you're not going to show up. This is just such common sense. So, look, I mean, I guess we could say good for the Biden administration on this. I mean, again, like they're literally just doing it at the force of like a judicial gun. I guess in theory they could like choose to defy the court order. So good for them for not defying this completely sane and proper court order. But look, the situation on the border is egregious for all the parties involved. Like Liz said, it's not just the ranchers. It's not just the people living on the border. It's terrible for them, too, obviously. But the cartels, we're talking here about the transnational cartels, the Sinaloa, folks like that operating in northern Mexico. We are talking about the most vicious non-state actors in the entire Western Hemisphere. Like, these people are brutal. So we don't want to empower them at all. We should be defanging them at any and all possibilities. And MPP is a very, very simple and straightforward way to do that.
So Janice says the person here that works for really the only cable news network that's covering this at all and then got banned at some point. I think Fox even had helicopters up there and drones that then were told they couldn't be up there. Do you sense we have any real idea of the numbers of people that have come in the last year, whether they have COVID or not, where they are, whether they brought kids, whether they're getting welfare, et cetera, et cetera?
I think you know the answer. It's absolutely, we're not getting those numbers at all. And listen, I'm Canadian, and by birth, I have dual citizenship. My father was American. I came to the land of opportunity, and I understand what it's like to want to come to America and make a life for yourself, because this is the greatest country in the world. And I still had a mound of paperwork to fill out to get into this wonderful country. So I understand why these people want to come here, but you have to do it the right way. You have to.